I think it's working now. Good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. It's Convocation time. This is the reason you got up and got out of bed this morning. Happy to be here. This morning we have international student report and also reports from interterm trips. But before we get on with that, we have a few announcements. Here we go.
So good morning, y'all. We're on the yearbook team. I'm Lindsay.
I'm Carmen.
And basically, our yearbook staff consists of 4 people. That's not a lot of people. And it's lacking the attention it needs, and so we could use all the help we can get. So if you have an interest in helping with pictures, let us know. Also with writing, we need a lot of help with writing. So if you're a good writer, it would be great if you could help us out. It doesn't have to be a continuous thing, but it would really help us out if you could help us with writing and any pictures. We just want to create a great yearbook, and without your help, it will be rough. And Carmen and I and a few others put in a lot of hours each week on the yearbook, and so it would be really helpful to have some help. So if y'all are interested, there's our emails. You can email us. You can find us on Instagram, whatever. Just, we need help, and we can't do it without you.
Also, one short thing to add, it doesn't have to be a consistent help. Like, if you're only like, oh, I'm in the, I don't know, soccer team, or I'm in the SGA or something, and you want to help in this particular page, do that. We don't require you to help us with the whole yearbook, but if you are proficient in one single thing here on campus and we have one page about it, that help would also be highly appreciated.
Hey everybody, my name is Ron Graham, Secretary of Diversity Council. Tonight we're doing the Black Excellence Showings. It's different from the Black Excellence Showcase. We're going to be in the lower Howery Lounge, just watching some TV shows and movies on Black Excellence. So come on out and there will be some free food.
And now my favorite athletic director, Tony Hoops, has a very historic announcement. Here we go.
Good morning, everybody. If you haven't heard, Bethel men's basketball got a huge win last night over Southwestern, 7-2. So congratulations, men's basketball. So we are putting together, we're still working on the logistics of this, but we're partnering Booster Club, SAC, and Student Life. Student Life has paid for the admission into games on the 2 quarterfinal games, so appreciate them stepping up and helping us out with that. So tomorrow, men's basketball play at Oklahoma Wesleyan. The game time is at 7 o'clock tomorrow. We want a bunch of students to go. So what we're doing is, through that partnership, we'll pay for your admission into the game. We're going to charter a bus. So the first 50 students that email Josh Booth will be able to get on that chartered bus. He's at 37 when I walked over here just a few minutes ago. Okay, and then SAC is going to help with the bus and as well as food. So we're going to pay for your admission, we're going to pay for your travel, and we're going to pay for your meal there as well. So if you want to go, you need to email Josh Booth. If we have more than 50, we'll look at other alternatives. We may consider bringing a van as well. Lil, did I miss anything there? Anything you want to add to that? Okay. But definitely want to have a great crowd there and support the opportunity that we have. If and when we win on Saturday night, Monday night will be championship night at Hartman Arena. That game time would be, I believe, at 8 o'clock or 8:30, something like that, which we'd love to have a huge crowd there as well. So, Lauren Reeser, did you have something to add today?
Well, now or later?
I don't know. It's your game here. You do what you want to do. All right?
Ladies and gentlemen, the king of kettle corn, Lauren Reeser. And now it's time for Convocation. Here are the International Students Club.
Servus.
Yokoso. Bienvenidos.
Welcome. Willkommen.
Bienvenidos.
Welcome. Benvenuto. Karibu.
Willkommen.
Hi everyone, I'm Kaho, a fifth-year student from Japan. I was the founder and had been the president of the International Student Club since I came to Bethel 3 years ago. But I have officially stepped down lately, and Matthias and Josh take over this role as co-presidents.
Hi, my name is Josh. I'm a freshman here, currently studying mathematical sciences. Firstly, before we start this, I just want to thank Keo for everything she's done for the international students last 2 years. She made this transition incredible for all of us, and it made it super easy to integrate into the family. Can we move it to the mission statement slide, please? Oh, can we do it myself? Cool. I get to play with the buttons. Okay. So our mission statement we came up with was to incorporate international culture into Bethel community, to support the international students as much as they can in their cultural and academic journey, and to create a stronger vigil between Bethel international students. For me, it was a massive culture shock moving from the UK, so it was huge that for this mission statement, I thought for myself and for everyone else who has never been to America before about how to transition from that period as easy as possible. I'm going to pass you on to Mateus.
Hey, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mateus. Mateus Tavares. I'm a sophomore. I'm from Brazil. And now we're going to talk about the events we have with the International Club. So one of the events is a chocolate event that was made for international students. It was made possible by Sam Haynes. And another event we had was the Friendsgiving, where we cooked international dishes of different parts of the world, and then we ate them. And we also have monthly international dinner, where we get together as international students and we talk about our experience here. That's pretty cool. So the goals of the club are to make cultural shock of new students as smooth as possible, to give Bethel community a sense of different cultures, and to create a stronger bond between international students. And I think that's very important, because when we get here, we kind of since we don't have any support from family or anything like that, we're kind of by ourselves. So creating a better support for new students is very important. And if you guys have any questions about the International Club or anything like that, you can email me or Josh. I'll be happy to help you. And yeah, thank you.
There's one final thing for the events. The 2 events that we plan to do this semester is to do Friendsgiving Part 2, because last time we did one, there was I think 3 different match days of games going on at that point, so the attendance wasn't as much as we hoped for. So the massive event we're going to do is Friendsgiving Part 2, where we have me, maybe KO again, and a few other international students who are going to cook their home meals. I plan on doing another lamb roast that I cooked last time. It took me about 8 hours to cook it, but I'll do it again, it's fine. And another one I plan on doing is, instead of an international chocolate event, we're going to do an international treat event, where I'm going to get actual biscuits from England, actual chocolate from what we had from last time, and we're going to bring in sweets and incorporate all the sugary stuff that we love from our home countries for you guys to enjoy, and that's what we're going to do. For the monthly international dinner, this was actually Sam Hayes' work. So every month, the CAF are planning on doing an international meal that they are going to cook, that we put forward, where we give them the recipe to follow. So look forward to that as much as possible. Thank you, guys.
So a group of 9 biology students went to Mexico over interterm, and the class was titled The Biological and Cultural Richness of Mexico. We went to 4 places, I guess. The first was Mexico City, where we did a lot of sightseeing of museums and churches and the presidential palace. It was also Christmas in Mexico still. They celebrate Christmas till early February, so the top right picture is some of the celebrations in the city square. Those are like spirit animals that were really lit up and colorful, and you could take pictures in front of them. That was definitely a highlight of the city for me. It was really pretty. We also went to 2 different beaches where we did some field work with releasing baby turtles that Annie will talk about later, and we also got to swim a lot, and we were here in the sun while you guys were in the blizzard, but so that was a good opportunity for us. We also spent about a week and a half in the jungle. We went to 2 different places in the jungle and stayed in very remote locations. The top left picture is actually where the 6 of us girls stayed, but it was so worth it. We got to do some field work with the plants in the jungle that we've never seen before, and it was just really pretty, and we got to hold alligators and see lots of wildlife like monkeys, and it was awesome.
All right, so the first beach place we went to was on the West Coast. It was called Puerto Arista, and I think this was a lot of our favorite place that we went to. The 2 main activities we did was the turtle release, like Mia said. We went to a turtle camp, and there they rescue the eggs from poachers, and then when they hatch, they let us release them, and it was straight out of the last song when we went out there at sunset and released them. There you can see us all lining up, and the sanctuary gave us these turtle shirts, so we wore them when we traveled back, and people in the airport, they would stop and stare at us, and we heard them like, oh, real marine biologists. Like, no, but you can think that. We stayed in a house, all of us together there. It was really nice. There was a pool and hammocks, but then right across the street was the beach. And so in that picture, you can see in the green shirt and is one of the professors from Unicash, and then Sergio, who you may have seen around, and then our driver and another student. And then 2 nights in a row at about 10:30, 11 or so, we went out to do a crab study, and we had no clue what this was going to entail, so we were kind of complaining about it because it was late at night. But it turned out to be the highlight. Basically, you just walk up and down the beach and catch crabs, and the whole point was to estimate the population size on the beach, so it was a mark and recapture study. So we would mark them with nail polish and measure them. And that one in the corner I named after my grandma because it was feisty. And yeah. Oh, okay. No, there we go. So then, as Mia said, we stayed in the jungle for about a week and a half. These pictures are from a place called Naha. It was about a 2-hour drive up a mountain on gravel roads. Jensen and I thought we were going to die a couple of times, but we're just dramatic. So here we did 2 main field studies. One was counting epiphytes, so like orchids, ferns, bromelia, and then also herbivory on these fish-tailed plants, as you can see with the main botanist guy, Adam, there. He was very excited about all the plants. There in the bottom corner, you see Zach being an outdoorsman, and here's my shout out. He's starting an outdoors club here on campus, so you can join that. Up in the middle picture there, Naha has a lagoon. that has crocodiles in it, and they let us swim in there. And Sergio told us that we aren't very tasty to them, so they'd stay away because we're annoying and loud. So I was never scared about the crocodiles personally. And then in the bottom corner there is our full group. We were with some of the students from Unicash for the majority of the trip while we were in the jungle for sure. And I think Natalie will talk about them later, but that was another highlight for me, was just getting to interact with them.
Okay, so while this was considered a biology trip, Fran made it a very big point to also look at Mexico from a multidimensional view. So we also learned about some of the cultural history and history of the region while we were there, which I personally really enjoyed as well. So first of all here, this is the Templo Mayor. This is in the center of Mexico City, and what Mia was talking about earlier, the city square called Zocalo is just adjacent over there actually too. So what was really cool about this structure is we could walk through. You can kind of see here on some walkways. And let's see, so then we also got to visit some ruins in Chiapas. So this is Palenque, these two are, and Bonampak and Yaxchilan. So what was really unique about these areas was Palenque was one of the biggest sites we went to actually, and had a lot of very unique structures. Like this was the main palace and this was another temple, so those structures were much bigger. At Bonampak they had very well preserved paintings, and at Yaxchilan it was very remote, so we had to take a boat up the river to actually get to it. Okay, so these are some pictures of the people that we got to meet along the way. This is the boat that we took to Yaxchilan. So this is the main group that we had. This was us, our Bethel group, and also the Unicash students and professors that we met along the way. This was another really cute boy that joined us for a little bit on our time in Puerto Rista. And this was a little girl. She was outside of Bonampak, actually. So the native people there sold bracelets to tourists that would walk through, and she was just playing with some of the Unicash students and just very friendly to us, which I really appreciated as well. So what was really interesting about Chiapas is it is home to more than 5 indigenous groups of people who are descendants of Mayan and Olmec people. So it was really cool to get to see their native land and also meet people, especially like her. So I'll give it back to Mia.
So while we were in the last beach, the Puerto Morales, we got to go to a paleontology lab, the pictures on the left, and this guy and his team go cave diving to find bones and fossils. And the picture right here is actually a complete set of bones of a Mayan woman from thousands of years ago. And they even found bones from human ears, which I thought was just so fascinating that in a cave filled with water they could find those things. Also, we went to an aviary and got to see a bunch of exotic birds there, and not pictured, but we also went snorkeling in the reef and in cenotes, which are when a cave caves in, the water is exposed, and you can go and either dive. We didn't dive in them, but we got to snorkel in them and see like just really clear, fresh water, and that was really fun. Also, one of my favorite parts, the food. We mostly ate Mexican food. We went out to restaurants 2 to 3 times a day for all of our meals. We also got comfort food too, like pizza and lasagna up in that corner, so that was nice. But it was actually much different than Mexican food here, as you would assume. Like those second from the bottom, the 3 little fried pockets of goodness are actually chimichangas. It's not a deep fat fried burrito like it is here, but they were really good, and I had like lots of smoothies and eggs for breakfast, and it was just really tasty. 2 more things I'd like to add is You don't have to be a biology major to go on this trip if you're interested. Jensen went and she was elementary ed and had a great time. Also, you don't need to know Spanish that well either. Ask Adam, he did fine. And then also on behalf of the 9 of us that went, we'd just like to thank Fran and Jerry and Sergio. They were very flexible and took a lot of time preparing for this trip and made it a great experience for all of us, so thank you.
And now we're going to go across the Atlantic.
Okay, so a little bit of a different trip, shifting gears to history. And same as their plug at the very end, you don't have to be a history major. I am a pre-med major and went on this trip and had a great time. So this was the whole group of us, plus we have some extras in this photo. The girl in the yellow hat is actually Mark Jansen's daughter. Her name is Kristen. She joined us for the entire trip, and she's still in Germany studying at Wuppertal. And the girl right in front of Mark is Teodora, and she's actually Serbian, and she is the niece of one of Mark's really close friends, so she joined us. And then the rest of us are Bethel students, and as you can see, Jacob was the lone guy on this trip, but he fit in well, and we all had a great time together. Okay, so the first place that we went to was Germany, and the first stop in Germany was the city of Berlin. And as you know, there's a lot of history in Berlin all throughout the 20th century and before. So this first picture, the biggest one, is a picture of the Brandenburg Gate, which if you're a history major, you know that's a really important landmark. And then the next picture, the one right here, this was a building that we went into, and I put that picture in there because if you've ever heard of the movie Bridge of Spies, that's actually where it was filmed. And so the red curtains that they had in there were not part of the original building plan, but they put them in there for the movie, and then they just left them. And it had a lot of really, really cool architectural rooms, and that was one of the highlights of the Berlin time. And then the picture on the top right is known as the clock, and it's a landmark in the city, and lots of people meet there, and it's just, everyone knows it. Everyone knows what it is and where it is, and it just tells the time for basically every country around the world. And then the bottom picture is some remnants of the Berlin Wall, which separated East and West Berlin after World War II. And this is just some remnants, but there was an actual memorial in a different part of the city that had pieces of the wall that were left. The next city we went to, it was pronounced Grossbeeren, and it was about a 20-minute drive from Berlin. We stayed with a host family here, and they were so sweet to us. They made us smoothies every morning for breakfast, and they were just so nice. And we were only there for one night, but it was awesome. So this first picture, the biggest picture, is a picture of their parliament. And this is actually from the inside. So that's the courtyard. And so it looks even bigger from the outside, and it's modeled after the original. And then the top right picture is the main hall in there, and we got to sit in those little red chairs, and we had a really good discussion about their politics, and it was really interesting to see how such a different system works. And then this bottom picture on the left, or on the right, is what we did in the afternoon that day. It's called the Church of the Garrison, and obviously this is not a good representation. It's really tall, and they're rebuilding this church, and it's actually super controversial that they're doing this because a lot of people in the city say that they shouldn't commemorate World War II, and they think it's a Nazi building, and so it's super controversial. But the people that are rebuilding it decided that the tradition of the church is more important than what it might stand for to some people.
So I'm going to talk about Poland. So we went to 2 cities in Poland. The first was Gdansk, and this was actually my favorite city on the trip. And one big reason for that was solidarity. So on the left there is a memorial to the workers of Solidarity, and that was a labor movement that started in the 1980s against communist oppression and sort of led Poland to democratization in the 90s nonviolently and peacefully. And so the memorial and the museum that we went to were really amazing. Like it was a really, really good museum. And it was just super impactful to me. And so that was probably my favorite part of the trip. And then also there on the right, you can see one of the days that we were in Gdansk, we went to a Mennonite church and cemetery where Mennonites who had lived in the Vistula Delta had buried people. And we were able to find some family connections of people that have Mennonite background and roots on our trip. So that was really cool to be able to see that. And then also in Gdansk, so we went to, this is the Malberg Castle, and this really sort of hit home for me, the just length of historical memory in Central Europe. So this castle was originally built by the Teutonic Knights and then has been ruled by, or has been inhabited by a bunch of other groups throughout history. And so it was just really an indication of like how much history is there and how big it is. And yeah, you can see there on the right, Mark, there was this like throne, and so Mark sat on it and was like, I'm in charge, haha. So, and then in the top left, okay, so we went to this castle, and then Mark took us to this restaurant in the castle, and they have something called Griebenschmaltz, which is lard and cracklings, and he was like, I haven't had this since I was on the farm in Nebraska, and so we got it for all of us to eat, and it was awful, it was disgusting. But it was a good experience, so. Other way. Okay, so then Krakow was the other city we went to in Poland. So up in the top left, you can see this is a castle that we went to, and you could really see the differences in architecture, like the way the architecture has changed throughout history and all the layers of history that are present. So they just had this cathedral and castle, and they just sort of added on in different architectural styles as history went on. So that was kind of neat to see. And then in the upper right-hand corner, that is from Auschwitz. So we toured Auschwitz-Birkenau when we were in Poland, and that was obviously really heavy and some difficult stuff to see, but it's also super important. It's very important history. And so I was really glad we got the opportunity to do that. And then in the bottom there on the left, that's the market square that we were in. So in the main square of Krakow, there is a market that has been in operation since the Renaissance. Like it's been continuously open all that time. And so we got to be in there, and that was really cool. And then lest you think that we spent all our time in museums, there on the right, we have Caroline Preheim trying to catch a pigeon. So Madeline said she would pay $50 to anyone who could catch a pigeon. And so she was really trying to catch this pigeon, and she did not. She failed, but valiant effort.
She even bought bread specifically to try to catch it. Yeah. Okay, this is the beginning photos of Budapest, and the photo on the left is a picture of our night train that we were on, and we were actually on a night train for 2 separate nights on the trip. That was the entire room for the entire night, and those were our beds. And I just threw this picture on because it was the first time that I think all of us except for Mark have been on a night train, and so that was a really interesting cultural experience for all of us, and it was definitely different, and I won't say that I will ever do it again. And then on the right is, I didn't want to put a picture of me on here, but this was the only photo I had of it. This is the bridge that separates Buda and Pest, and so historically these cities were 2 separate cities. Budapest was divided. And then the building in the back you can see with the green roof is the Parliament building in Buda, and so that's where they made all the government decisions back in the olden days. And then this is some more pictures from Budapest. So this big picture on the left is in a museum called the Topography of Terrors. And I put this on here because this is a photo of all the propaganda that they had in Hungary in World War II. And it was really interesting for me to be in this museum because when we think about World War II, we typically think about Germany because that's where most of the things happened that we know about. But it was really interesting to learn about the history of other countries during this time too, because Germany was definitely not the only country affected. And so I thought that was really interesting to learn about. And then the other two pictures are pictures of churches. This was the outside of the church, and then the inside of the church. This was probably one of the most beautiful churches that we went into, in my opinion. And yes, we went in a lot of churches because it's Europe and they have lots of big old churches. But yeah, the art in this church was just incredible.
Okay, and then the last place we were was in Belgrade. So in Belgrade, we met up with Georgie, who is an alum of Bethel, and he's Serbian, and so and he's there in the picture, and he took us around Belgrade. And one really cool thing that he did was give us a tour of the National Theater, where his dad was an opera singer for a long time. And then that night we got to watch Swan Lake in seats up at the top. So you can see Bill and Mark up there in their seats at the National Theater. And then another really cool thing that we did was we spent a day with Bread of Life, which is an organization that Mark worked with when he was in Serbia. And they help Roma children. So Roma are this really disadvantaged group in Europe, and they run a daycare for kids, among other things. And so we got to spend some time with the kids, which you can see in the upper right. And that was just this really great experience to see that. And then, okay, bottom left, just a little story here. So we went to this Serbian restaurant, and there's this meat plate that you can get. And so Mark got the meat plate, which has like 8 different kinds of meat. Anna and Jacob also split a meat plate. Mark will tell you he finished his meat plate. Not true. And so that was a fun thing that we got to do. And then that's a picture of all of us in the bottom right there.
Yeah, those are all the pictures we have. If I were to add anything, I would say this trip is definitely worthwhile. And even though we went into lots of churches and museums, we all still had a great time. And we not that they aren't fun, but after a while it's just like, ooh, okay, lots of information. But it was really fun, and we learned a lot. We got to see 4 different countries, all very different from each other, and so overall it was just a great cultural experience.
And thank you to Mark for taking us and putting up with us.
Yes.
And now we're headed back to this continent, heading down to Mexico with the social work trip.
All right, so we also went to Mexico, but we stayed in Cuernavaca for the majority of the thing. The title of this class was Social Development and Social Justice in Mexico. Kind of like all the other ones, you don't have to be a social work major to be a part of this trip. It's a lot of fun, no matter what profession you want to go into. This is kind of an overview of what we did. We were in Cuernavaca for the most of it, and then the last week we were in Mexico City. We were in Morelos, Mexico, which is a state of Mexico. And we stayed with Quest, which is led by a guy named Gerardo de Bink. Yeah. And so he he sponsored us, kind of took us around Cuernavaca and then smaller villages around the area. And majority of what we did was talk to people. We weren't going to a whole bunch of historical sites. We did go to historical sites, but majority of what we did was talking with people, hearing their stories, hearing about the culture of Mexico, kind of the history of Mexico, and how people feel about that, the injustices that are surrounded in that culture. And that was mostly in Cuernavaca. We were there for about 2.5 weeks, and then the last week we were in Mexico City. In Mexico City, we were led by an MCC sponsor and went around to different historical sites, met with different people around that area, and we'll talk more in detail about what we did throughout this. So, someone doing Quest? I got it. So Quest, this is kind of a picture of the place we stayed at. It was kind of like hotel style, but it was his house. So he has a number of groups that come and stay, and he takes them around and kind of teaches him the culture around the thing. He's actually a Canadian, so he's Canadian and had a very interesting life story where he went down to Mexico because he wanted to do more with his privilege, and then kind of was like, wow, this is something that I feel like I need to do with my life. And then set up this organization. It's on the real down low in Mexico because officials can't figure out about it because there's a lot of corruption within the Mexican government. So we got to learn a lot about that. He was a very good teacher. His family was amazing. We stayed with his family and got to know them. They cooked breakfast and lunch and dinner for us. So we had like homemade Mexican food. It was amazing. And then majority of our time we were spent taking a van somewhere and talking to people and learning about their lives. I don't know if it's taking a van. We crammed like, 17 people?
I sat on a water jug most of the time in the van.
Yeah, we all crammed into a van. It was a lot of fun trying to figure out how we were all gonna fit. All right. And then some of the history.
Okay, so one of the first things I'm going to talk about is School of Americas, which was a very important thing that we learned about. If you don't know what it is, I suggest you go home and Google it. So it was founded in the Panama Canal Zone way back when, and it's now known as WINSEC, so that stands for Western Hemisphere Institute for Security and Cooperation. So it's currently located in Fort Benning, Georgia. In 1996, the Pentagon released like pamphlets of what the school is about, and it was discovered that this school, they train like soldiers and police and like those type of people, but they from Latin American countries, but they really encourage like torture. They violate human rights, just stuff that is not right. So that was very important for us to learn about. When we were researching about it, Akia and I found out that it's known as like the school of dictators. So presidents from like Bolivia, Colombia, people who run cartels, just even this morning I was reading about it again to refresh, like the things that they do just aren't right. So that was very important for us to learn about and how that affects Mexico and all Latin American countries.
Kind of just going off of that for a second, what's really crazy about that is the U.S.'s sponsorship of it. It's essentially a U.S. program through our military. It's funded by the United States government. It's funded by our taxpayer dollars. And yeah, like looking through the list, like they had like this list of just like people that had graduated from SOA that had gone on to be assassins, dictators, like terrorists, all kinds of like crazy stuff. And it was found that like the pamphlets that they were using, the books that they were using, like those kind of tactics weren't even approved for the US military to use, but yet they were teaching it to Latin American like officials and military members. So yeah. We also saw like a bunch of historical sites. We went to some, so right here is actually where like, so we learned about this guy named Zapata, and he was actually killed there, like where we are taking that picture. But he was like the early 1900s, like 1912s or something. And essentially he kind of led like these plebeian, like farmer revolts sort of against the government, like, you know, we are the working class. And so in the 1990s, there was like this uptick and like the government had tons of corruption. And so there were groups that were forming all over that just were essentially like average workers, and they really felt like they connected with sort of the themes that Zapata had like taken on early on. So they called themselves the Zapatistas. And now they're actually essentially, so if you thought about what like Indian reservations are like here now, how like they're not governed by US law, they have their own law and stuff. So the Zapatistas, they actually form sort of their own communities. They're governed by their own kind of laws. They accept no government aid. They have like their own police force, their own military. Women are like of huge prominence. They are really sort of based in sort of communitarian values and working together. But then a little bit more about the government. So it was really unfortunate. We learned a lot of things that I think it's just crazy that we've never heard before.
a lot about how the U.S. plays into a lot of corruption in Mexico, how the U.S. has sort of helped and sponsored like narcos and whatnot, but especially how the Mexican government is constantly in collusion with narcos. The Mexican government is responsible for the majority of disappearances in Mexico, which is where, like, you know, if they find out about a social justice advocate, like that social justice advocate just suddenly disappears one day. You might find their body, you might not. We met with a guy that he was a Colombian refugee, and he talked to us about, essentially, he just talked to us about how he had worked for social justice in Colombia, and he found out that his name was on a hit list, and so he like fled Colombia and came to Mexico. And so yeah, that was sort of like a huge like shock or like mind blow to us, and really inspired a lot of us, I think.
So even on a really basic level of government corruption, Gerardo, when we were in Cuernavaca, was telling us that there's reasons why you don't carry around more than like $5 to $10 or $50 pesos at a time, like in your wallet, maybe like hidden in your car somewhere. But like if a police officer pulls you over, like they're gonna, like they don't really get paid much either, the police officers, so they're gonna like try to like try to sell you the biggest ticket, and you're not gonna want to pay that, so you'll like pay him off, and like when you open your wallet and he sees like a bigger bill, like he's gonna want that bill. So yeah, there's that. So the people that we met, do you want to talk about Gloria?
So Gloria was an El Salvadorian refugee, so here a history major. Honestly, I'm a history major, but I do like American history. Sorry, Mark. So I don't even know much about other history. But if you're a history major and you know a little bit about like Latin America and whatnot, so there have been tons of like civil wars essentially all throughout Latin America, and in El Salvador it wasn't exempt from this. There were huge like rioting, there was huge just lots of like killing on both sides and stuff. So Gloria, we sat down with her, and this was one of the most amazing things, to continue to get to sit down with people and then tell us their stories and just be so vulnerable and open. And none of us even knew Spanish, but like Gerardo was amazing, and he translated the entire thing, and we got to really put our social work values into practice. And she just told us about like the horrors that she had gone through, but this woman was just so insanely strong, so optimistic. Everyone we met was so welcoming. They all said like, you know, my home is open to you anytime, like please come back to my home, like this home is your home, and they just were so kind. But then this was especially important to me because I was just in DC last semester, and in DC there's a ton of pupuserias, and pupusas are an El Salvadorian like delicacy, I would call it. And Gloria taught us how to make pupusas. So essentially, if you thought of like, are they like tortas? It's like a thick tortilla that has like, you can put a whole bunch of stuff in it. We like made them with like cheese, and we made like bean and cheese ones. But this was amazing because back in DC, I was like, man, I'm never gonna have these again in my life. But then Gloria taught us how to make them. So that's a picture of Gloria, my hair, and pupusas. So, yeah.
So when, was this still, yeah, we were in Cuernavaca, and Gerardo would take us to go see like different villages and people, and this guy, I don't have a pointer, but he's the one, yeah, in the blue. His name was Nacho Torres, and the other guy's Gerardo. He was a native Mexican man who got pushed away from his land, and he took us on this like indigenous ritual kind of thing, and so he was like, it's kind of a walk, and some of us weren't excited about that, but then on our walk he was telling us to like pick something up to like put in like a circle for our ritual, and so like some of us picked up like rocks or like flowers or sticks or whatever, and when we got there, it was this beautiful place. I mean, you can kind of see around. That doesn't really give it much justice. There were like two big rocks like on the other side of the camera, like to your back, but he put like corn in the center of the thing, like facing each direction, like north, south, east, and west. And he had like this magic conch shell thing that he like blew into like the directions. And he like held up your hands, and he felt all this different kinds of energy. And he told you like after doing that, like to shake your hands out and then put them together and bounce them back and forth, and you could like feel the energy and tension. And that was the craziest thing, like most real thing I've ever felt. It was a wild spiritual journey. But before we went there, we sat at his house and talked for a little bit. And probably my favorite quote that he said was that, this is a rough quote, but he said, when you begin to privatize land is when you allow for oppression. And I think that's just wild to me. He had such a pure idea about land and how we should treat land, and I enjoyed it a lot. So next,
Okay, so the guy on the left of Joe in the white, that's Hustine, I think his name is, but he introduced himself as Justin Bieber, so we actually met a famous person. But his house, I guess you could call it, it's actually a boxcar from a train, is located in an area of Cuernavaca called La Estacion, so there's a lot of like boxcar houses like this. It's very small inside, but we went and visited with him and other families. We talked with them, they told us their story. You know, we were a big group, 15 to 17 of us, depending on the day, and they were so welcoming. They pulled out every chair they had. There was one night we went back to his house, and he made us food. His wife owns like a little food thingy that she sells, food stand that she sells to like their neighbors and stuff. They were very, very generous. So he was a really great person. Like I said, very, very welcoming.
He also gave us all tequila shots for free.
Oh, okay, so let's jump ahead to Mexico City. So this is Casa Tochan, sorry. So this is one of the places that we went to with MCC. They are a migrant/refugee center. So it's mainly all men that come through here, but they do occasionally have families and women. So it's people coming up from like Guatemala, Colombia, El Salvador, and they come and stay here while they're on their journey. Some of them might just stay in Mexico, but a lot of them are going on to try to come into the US. So this place provides a safe space for them. They get any resources that they might need. They take classes, they prepare them for what they might experience, although you can't really prepare for what you're gonna experience. So we sat and talked and heard about all their stories. There were probably about, 20 men, and it was just incredible from what they're fleeing from. I mean, like some of them are wanting, have people who wanna murder them. Some are trying to find better resources for their family, money. Like it's just things that we could never be able to understand. So yeah, it was a good experience. Oh yeah, and that was Gina in the middle. Can you go back? Gina, right there. She was our leader.
Oh, sure. So I don't really know what all those black letters are. So I'm just gonna tell you, when we were in Cuernavaca, Gerardo set up this game, and I believe that he made it. Him and like a few other people made it. But there's pieces you can see. So we all have a map of the world, and we like broke up into little groups, and there were like little pieces, and they all meant something different. So there were like little blue people or like little purple, I think, things, and those were like the people in the world. And so like one piece was like so many thousand people, and you were supposed to put them on the continents of where you believe, like what percentage of people in the world were from or where they're at. Or populated, and then there were ones for like cars and like military power, like nuclear power, I guess, and like the money and I don't remember what else, but this was super eye-opening to a lot of people because you had to like guess, and after the first one, like he wouldn't tell you. It wasn't until the entire game. What? No, he would tell us. Just kidding. But we were wrong. We were very wrong a lot of times about a lot of things. We don't know much, and this map game was, it made me specifically, and probably a few other people, feel pretty arrogant and feel like they know very little, like even about like the US. Like we knew so little. Like we thought we had all this stuff, but it's like you didn't even know about resources in other countries. So very eye-opening, and I wish we could have just brought like one game back here so like other people could pass it around and play it, because super eye-opening experience.
All right, yeah, so just to conclude kind of thing, this is a very eye-opening trip, kind of like a lot goes into it. We had a lot of fun, met a lot of people, and so we also want to shout out to Jen and Ada who have put this together, and like we're like the trip leaders. It was really big for us.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.